Alright, this is the Wikstrand, so let's talk for a second about actors, actresses and age. In 1976, Dustin Hoffman starred in the movie The Marathon Man, a very good movie. The point is that he was 36 years old at the time and was a college student. He didn't look like he was in college, he looked like he was older than me, for Christ's sake. They could have fixed this rather easily just by saying that, well, I worked for 10 years as, a bartender or a painter or a chimney sweeper or whatever, to explain, I wanted to continue with my, studies. That is how you fix that thing. In the movie Bandidas, Salma Hayek's rich, landowner's daughter behaves basically like she is in her early 20s, or even as she is a teenager. She was 37 at the time, and despite being hotter than a Vindaloo factory, she still looks like a fully matured woman who shouldn't be acting like this at her age. They could have explained that, but they didn't. In the movie Sabotage, by the way, a very underrated action movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was almost 70 years old, but they still trotted him out being, leader of this rough and tough, DEA SWAT team thing. He looked so old and crusty despite, them trying to, dye his hair black or whatever it was. Why are you doing this? You should be behind a desk or retired. In the movie Michael Collins, we have a mid-40s Liam Neeson playing Michael Collins, who was, early 20s at the time. Now, it worked better because I didn't know that Michael Collins was supposed to be that age at that time. But it would have still been better to have somebody else at role. I don't know, maybe. But the fact is that Taraji P. Henson is, asking, her friends or whatever, why is, that, hunky gym guy checking me out in the elevator? Maybe it is because you're 49 years old, you're a relatively attractive woman, but you're still almost 50 years old, and maybe he's not into the MILF things because she's acting like she is 25, maybe 30 years old. But you are middle-aged and you have actually left the Middle Ages some time ago. Act your age. But that is not this movie's main issue. This movie has a bunch of other issues that I have with this movie, but let's find out what this movie is about and if you will like it and if you can overlook her behavior, shall we? This is What Men Want. The short answer to that is, of course, pussy and money. So Allie Davis sees herself as, being the new partner of this, famous sports agency in Atlanta. And she thinks that she's going to be, one of the new partners, but she is sidestepped, and she thinks that it's just because she's a woman and, that these blokes are being very blokish and, shuts her out because they're afraid of that, she's too smart for them and will outshine them or whatever. But the thing is that things are about to change a little bit for her because, during this bachelorette party thing, she gets knocked loopy, and when she wakes up, she can hear what men talks. It's an insane amount of, day drinking on the jobs and doing coke. I thought they were going to talk more about the Roman Empire and getting pussy, but I digress. So is she going to use this newly found power of hers to, getting some smoochy time with the nice bartender? Is she going to advance her standings within the sports agency? Is she going to sign that huge sports star by manipulating his father, played by Tracy Morgan? That's what we're going to find out in this movie. Now, one thing that should be mentioned about this movie is, of course, that this is essentially a remake, reboot, reimagination sort of What Women Want that came out in the year 2000. And fate put it that way that I saw What Women Want for the first time 2 months before I saw this movie the first time. That may have done some damage to this movie's ratings. I don't know, because I just thought that that movie had so much more humanity and it had so much more interesting story, and it had so much more comedic time to itself. It did have its, own piece of baggage that this movie kind of also has. It was also too long, like this movie was, but it also had a good character arc for our main character. Mel Gibson actually, learned something and, became a more interesting character as the movie went by. This movie had no such a thing in it. This movie also was so afraid of being quiet because everybody kept shouting all the time, and there was really nothing here that worked. There are glimpses of ideas here where you can see the comedy shine through. You can see, well, they could have done this, they could have done that, they could have done this, but they chose to do the simplest and most and less nuanced thing at every given opportunity. So is this movie bad? No, it is not bad, but it just takes so long time to get going. Tracy Morgan can always be a bit of a hit and miss. This is one of these things that is basically in the middle. He can sometimes be so annoying that you can't stand him, and sometimes he can be really, really funny. This is, as I said, basically in the middle. There are a couple of sequences in this movie that was absolutely hilarious. The wedding sequence was absolutely comedy gold, which also gives us a little bit of a glimpse into what could have been if they could have been a little bit smarter with its writing and its direction. I don't know whether or not you should have recasted Taraja or not. I think she was okay in this movie, nothing to write home about. She was there and she had her moments, but maybe this movie should have been written for somebody else. I don't know who, but there wasn't really anything here to really grab me. My favorite character was probably the guy who yelled in his phone the entire time. It was kind of hilarious, and he was actually energetic and gave this movie a bit of chaotic identity to itself, because apart from that, this was a very, very, very long time of getting going. And also, I hated the ending to this movie. I hated it. It was the laziest, most cliche-filled stuff I've ever seen. I thought this thing had died decades ago, but apparently it's still alive and well in the year 2019 when this movie was released. It doesn't really, break any new grounds of male, female, and the gender dynamics or anything like that, which they could have done. And it just told us basically the most comfortable and safe story they could find with this sort of subject. I wish they could have gone a little bit further. I wish they could have taken some risks, but this is a relatively safe, a mostly harmless comedy that you really cannot say anything bad at. It is just a little bit boring. It just takes so long for us to actually get anywhere, and once we actually got to that place, we're thinking, I don't know, this is just so simple and this is just so boring and bland, and couldn't we have done anything better with this? But I'm sure that many people will watch this movie and say, hey, this movie actually had some, interesting parts, and it had good characters, and it had some insightful comedy. Maybe that is so, but I just didn't see it. I saw an underwhelming comedy that had all the potential to do something unique and new, but decided to do none of those things. Is it horrible? No. Is it forgettable? Yes. Do I think that What Women Want is a better movie than this one? Yes. Is that because of the star power? Maybe. But it's always fun with a Shaquille O'Neal cameo, I guess. But apart from that, I don't know. There wasn't too much to say about this movie. It was totally fine. But it's very easily forgettable. Now I will say this, that What Women Want is not a fantastic movie, but it is a fine movie. This one is just a bit less fine. I give What Men Wants 28 points. I think that the story about the sports agency wasn't as interesting as the advertisement agency that Mel Gibson was heading up, and I just didn't think that her story was as interesting as his was. Now, if I hadn't seen What Women Want before this, would I have looked more favorably upon this movie? Not impossible, but in this case, I guess we'll never find out. So which movie do you prefer? Do you prefer What Men Want or What Women Want? Comment below, and I'll see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.